Rich is back because he recently returned from a medical trip to Mexico to get dental work done. And it turns out he's not alone. Many Americans are skipping the US system to choose to seek healthcare in Mexico. As CNN is reporting here, medical tourism to Mexico is on the rise, but it can come with risks. Of course, going to the American medical system comes with no risks. Just going down to Mexico does. I don't know. You might not get kidnapped at an American hospital. We're going to ask Rich about all that. I do know you guys. I believe anyway. You were wearing AirTags, so I'm going to ask you about all that. But let's just start with why. Why are Americans choosing to walk across the border to Mexico in order to get healthcare? Is it just cost? Is it better treatment? Rich, what were your reasons?
Well, good morning, Allison. Good morning, everyone. The reasons were really quite simple. The cost. I think everyone's pretty aware the cost of care in the American medical system is exorbitant. It's unreachable for most families and most individuals. Even with the Affordable Care Act implementation almost, 15 years ago now, even if you have insurance, the cost of having that insurance is high. And then your average deductible for an ACA plan, or what's also known as Obamacare, is about $6,700 a year. So most families are forced to not only just pay premiums, which can average anywhere from a couple $100 a month to a couple $1,000 a month, they're also forced to pay these high deductibles to even get the coverage that they're paying for. So then once you get through that framework, you then have the cost of the care delivery itself, which, whether it be medical or dental, can range into the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's quite a big issue. I know that there's been a couple of years back, a law was put in place to prevent, to soften the blow of some of these costs, because individuals were being forced to file bankruptcy and losing their homes over medical care. That's just not a sustainable system. So this is exactly why my family and I decided to do something different and try something else, so to speak.
Okay, we're going to show some video, Rich down there, and ask him how it all went in a second. Since we're talking about dental care, I figured I would tell you all about my favorite product, which is a sponsor of the show, greenpasture.org, promo code Allison. Get your fermented cod liver oil and concentrated butter oil blend. I was just reading about Dr. Weston Price, who's a biological dentist turn of the century, who researched indigenous cultures who had no dental care, but virtually no cavities. Anyway, he came up with a lot of formulations that really came back down to diet. And one of the reasons that he focused on vitamins and mineral deficiencies in his patients was really because of industrialized processed foods and what we were missing in our diet. This fermented cod liver oil, concentrated butter oil blend is one of the it's a food item. It's not really a supplement, but it was what he suggested should be formulated to help boost your vitamin D, but all of the other synergistic vitamins and minerals that we need in order to help our teeth. And really, it's not just help for oral needs, but it's been a wonderful product for our family. We've been taking over for 10 years, helped me with my cavities, but also just your immune system and your brain health, your joints. So go check it out. They've got lots of other products there too. We like the cinnamon tingle flavor. That's what we take, is a cinnamon tingle gel. My kids take it too. And it's just a great company. The way they process it and just the way that they treat their customers is all just wonderful. So go check them out. greenpasture.org, promo code Allison. You get 10% off your purchase. Okay, Rich, I want to ask you now about how it went. What was your, before we get into a deep dive on it, were you satisfied with the care that you got?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only was I satisfied, it was efficient and cost effective. It's really that simple. And the town we went to is called Nuevo Progreso. It's on the border across from Westlake, Texas. It's not a big town, not really a well-known town, not like a Reynosa or Matamoros or Monterrey or some of the other border towns that have made the news recently. But the entire town, their entire economy is based on medical tourism. Literally, there's four city blocks that are all doctors and pharmacists. And when you cross in, yes, it's a different world. You really start to understand how blessed we are to be here in the United States when you go to another country, specifically northern Mexico. But the whole economy of that town is based on doctors and medical care for Americans.
Going back to the question about security, which I think is a lot of what people wonder when making this decision. I know you guys were thoughtful about this, whether this was safe and how you're going to try to stay safe. This article dates back to 2023. Four kidnapped Americans are part of a large wave of U.S. medical tourism in Mexico. It's a story that was also covered by CNN. Medical tourism to Mexico is on the rise, but it can come with risks. So this all came out after these folks were kidnapped. What were some of the security tips, I guess, that you took to heart, and could you share them with other people that might be considering making this, like the stuff that you learned as you were going through the process to try to make sure you were safer? And did you feel unsafe at any point in time?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid concern. Obviously, the that area of the world has a lot of issues right now and challenges. Um, the first thing we did was we know people personally, friends that are from that area, very good friends of ours that are aware of the area, that are familiar with the terrain. They also had previously utilized these services. So we did some initial vetting. So as for diligence, I would not recommend going to Google and just finding somebody. That's probably not a good idea. I mean, it may work out, it may not. It's just like anything else in life. However, having a trusted source, a word of mouth referral is always the best way to validate the quality of the service you're going to receive. So that's where we started. And then, you ask deeper questions as where should I go? Where should I not go? What's safe? What's not safe? And we were given some pretty clear parameters on what we should and shouldn't do. But just to give you an overview of Nuevo Progreso, what I've heard through word of mouth is actually a town run by the cartels. The government of Mexico doesn't really have much control of most of northern Mexico. That's I've heard many people say that to me that live there. So with that being said, the cartels are profiting off of this medical tourism. So it's in their interest to, from what I was told, it's in the cartel's interest to protect those coming in and utilizing the services. So I can't say you're absolutely safe, but I would say that was actually reassuring to some extent because this is where free markets work, right? The idea that we're bringing capital to an area that needs capital, they're going to do what they need to do to make sure those services are delivered in an efficient, safe way. However, there were some additional parameters which we followed, and that was don't bring your car into Mexico. That was a recommendation. Now, I saw folks doing that where we went into Nuevo Progreso. There's a pedestrian bridge, so we didn't have to do that. But when you go to those border crossings, there's Texas license plates on the other side, and there's back and forth all the time. But it was recommended you don't bring your vehicle if you're not familiar or don't have connections there or a reason to bring your vehicle there. Biggest reason why is that there is hardly any car insurance in Mexico, and if you are hijacked or robbed, there's your American insurance company will not cover you, and there are some services where you can buy coverage, but there's limitations. And then the other recommendation was make sure you leave before dark. All right, so. Oh, and there was a third. Stay within the 4-block radius of Nuevo Progreso. There's a 4-block radius where all these doctors and restaurants and bars and gift shops, they all kind of congregate. They are all kind of located. If you go off of those 4 blocks, you're kind of in an area where you don't know who's running things, so to speak.
Interesting. Um, so did you feel like that worked? Did you feel like those tips worked well for you? And would you have done anything differently? Were there at any points in time you felt unsafe?
It's funny. I liken it to, yeah, of course, you keep your head on a swivel. Like it's a new place, right? And I think it's human nature to say, hey, this is all new. But you know what it reminded me of? Nuevo Progreso reminded me of New York City in the 1980s. My parents ran a jewelry store back in that time frame, and they used to travel to the Diamond District in Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, back in the 1980s. And that was before Mayor Giuliani came in and cleaned everything up in the 90s. The area around Times Square was full of triple X, nude shows, very not family friendly places. You go there today, there's like Johnny Rockets and Guy Fieri's restaurant. That wasn't like that back in the 1980s. And there was a lot of, people on the street hustling. And I remember as a little kid, I'd look up at, the big buildings, the beautiful buildings of Midtown Manhattan. Just amazing to see as a small child. And my dad would grab the back of my head and, Richie, look down. And I'd be like, you know, scared. And then he would tell me, if you look up at the buildings, you're a mark. Because back in that time in the 1980s, in Maricocha's New York City, you could be mugged. And you got to remember, my parents probably had tens of thousands of dollars in jewelry with them, right? So, I think maybe I'm unique in that fact that I had a baptism by fire at a young age, so I kind of know how to operate in certain environments. But I will tell you this: looking around, there were many Americans walking around, smiling, laughing, having margaritas, and it's really, I think, relatively safe. But that's Nuevo Progreso. I can't speak for other border towns. I did hear, that there's some others, maybe like Reynosa, that are a little more dangerous. And, not to mention my own, the doctor we saw, he actually had been kidnapped about 10 years ago, which is an interesting story in itself. But
Okay, you'll have to tell us about that. Sounds like after something like that, he could use a good glass of wine. So make sure to let him know he can sign up for AllisonWinePromo.com. We don't have any wines that come from Mexico, but we do have some from Argentina, Chile, and France, Spain, Italy. These are all picked for the kinds of stuff I like to eat and drink, which is clean production and processing, like natural fermentation. They use old world winemaking techniques. Some of these families have been in the wine business for several hundred years, multiple generations. The wine that is in the Argentina bottles usually comes from between 6,000 and 9,000 feet. If not 6,000, then like 4,000. I mean, they very, very high altitudes. So they're products you cannot get really anywhere else. They are extremely limited in production. If it weren't for Bonner Wine, probably most of these wines would never make it to the United States. Go join the Allison Wine Club, AllisonWinePromo.com. You will get 6 bottles every 3 months. It's a great way to support the show, and you will get gifts for people, right? These can be gifts. If you're not a wine drinker, then you always have a great bottle of wine to bring with you. You're going down to Mexico, you're a little nervous, you're going to get abducted, bring a bottle of wine, hand it to the guy that's trying to carjack you, and tell him this is worth far more than your Hyundai that you rented. Okay. Just give him some Allison, winepromo.com, and I'm sure he'll leave you alone.